Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Deafology presents You Are Not Alone. So this week, as you can see, I have my beautiful hosts. You have your beautiful hosts, me, Shantae, and my beautiful interpreter, Leah Taylor, and in our back office as president running the show, we have Miss Donna. She is the silent partner. So, hello. So, this week we are going to talk about IEPs versus 504s. So, let's jump into it. Uh-oh. I can't see. Hold on, guys. I don't know why my PowerPoint. There we go. Hold on, everybody. I apologize. The PowerPoint is not doing what it needs to do. So, all right. We got it up. Alrighty. So again, we're going to be talking about the IEPs versus 504s. If you have any questions, please let us know. Alrighty. So what is the purpose of an IEP? So it is to set responsibilities, learning goals for your child. It is also to state the service that the school district will provide for your child. So basically, it has goals that are built inside the IEP for your child, and that the state or the school district will carry out these goals. They will assess your student on the goals to see if your student will meet the goals themselves. Who develops the IEP? So the IEP is developed by a team of individuals that includes the key staff and the parents. So typically what that looks like is going to include the resource teacher or the SPED teacher. It's going to include the principal. It should include the principal or the vice principal. It's going to include, depending on how your school is set up, it should include their teachers because they're part of the team, and the parents. And if there's any outside resources, it will also include them as well. The team meets and reviews the assessments, information available about the child, and designs an educational program to address the child's educational needs that results from his or her disability. What's the specifics of who you'll find on the IEP team? So I just covered that. So it is basically you, the SPED teacher, the resource teacher, the principal or vice principal, their teachers, and any other important person like the psychologist. If you have an outside psychologist, sometimes doctors will even sit in on an IEP as well. When is an IEP developed? So an IEP meeting must be held within 30 days of a calendar in the school year. Sometimes when it's a rush or it's really fast, they will ask you to waive that 30-day period. Or it may be a little bit sooner, it may be a little bit later. It just depends on the school and the circumstances. So after it is determined through a full and individual individual evaluation that a child has one of the disabilities listed in the IDEA and the needs of special education. So what that means is that there is a guideline that a child must meet the criteria of that guideline. So what they'll do before they even say, yes, your child needs a IEP, is they will send your child for an evaluation or an assessment to see what skills or where the delays or where the gaps, or if there's issues, because sometimes your child may not qualify for IEP, but will qualify for a 504. So we'll talk about that. Reading on, a child's IEP must also be reviewed at least annually to determine whether or not the child has met the goals, determine whether or not the goals are needed. So they meet every year, and then there is a IEP review every 3 years where your child has to be reevaluated every 3 years to make sure are the accommodations still adequate for that child. Does certain accommodations need to be added for that child? So they really list, is an IEP still warranted for that child? So can students be involved in developing their own IEP? Yes, they can. In my daughter's case, she was asked to create a PowerPoint and a slide to help develop her IEP. It is not typical. So for the younger kids, normally they're not involved in that process because they don't understand what IEP is. Older kids, depending on the mental capacity, hello Lynn, they can be involved in the IEP. It just depends on the school as well. Some schools may not want an IEP for a child to be involved in the IEP. So that is something to think about. So we're going to begin the guide for individual plan. So what is an IEP? So it is a written legal document. You need to make sure you understand that an IEP, you can take it into a court. It is legally binding. Whatever they put in that IEP that holds the district, it holds the school accountable for what they should be doing on a consistent basis. When they stop doing it, they are in breach of this legal document. So it is also a roadmap, again, that lays out the program for the special needs, what instruction, what supports, the services that a child may need, from buses to special speech therapists to occupational therapists, etc. That's what it lays out. Okay, I'm going to try to keep this pretty brief and not read everything, but it's up there for quite a while. So some myths about IEPs. One is every child who struggles is guaranteed an IEP. No, this is not true. So just because your child struggles in school doesn't mean your child needs an IEP. Now, you will have some schools that will want to put your child on the IEP or 504 because there's money in it. Or they may say, well, your child is ADD or ADHD and would qualify for a 504, if not an IEP. Your child will need medicine. It's a big headache. So you have to be careful because not every child needs an IEP. Remember, there are certain criteria that have to be met in order for your child to be able to attain an IEP. Okay. Number two, if something is in the IEP, the school will make it happen. They're supposed to. So it goes back to the IEP is a legal written document. If it is put in the IEP, they should be making it happen. If it says that your child needs an interpreter, but guess what? Your child better have an interpreter. If it says that your child has to sit in front of the classroom, guess what? That child needs to be sitting in the front of the classroom. If it says that your child is needing special equipment or testing, extra time on testing read to them, whatever, if they need a device, they have to provide that. Hello, if you're coming on, thank you for joining Deafology. Let's see here. Oh, I'm sorry, did I go to that? Number three, an IEP will provide services and support for your child beyond high school. So services, says the IEP and the services it guarantees will end when the student graduates from high school. Now, some states have programs after a student graduates from high school. So like in Kansas, they have the STAR program. So that when a student graduates, it gives them a couple of more extra years in a school setting, in a structured setting, if need be. But an IEP is not guaranteed to go outside of school. Now, I believe in the state of Indiana, they have where if you need accommodations, if a child is going off to college or something like that, and they meet the requirements, then they'll accommodate that. But the IEP ends at graduation. Myth number 4, having an IEP means your child will be placed in a special education classroom. This is not true. So law was passed that students need to be in the least restrictive environment. This means that they need to be placed in some of their time needs to be in a regular classroom, regular setting. It means that you can't just tuck them away in a classroom and just forget about them. They need to be interacting. So some kids are in classrooms that have IEPs because they have that IEP, but most of their IEPs are for accommodations. So not necessarily special education or SPED, or they have a dual diagnosis. So they want a least restrictive environment. Also, a child can go to the resource room. Let me clarify this. A resource room works on the gaps. So they take what the child is learning. They don't pull them from a room or pull them from a subject and not build on what's being taught in that room. So not only do they build on what's being taught in that room, they also fill the gaps. So some resource rooms have resource paras that will come into a classroom and provide that extra support for that child. And then if more support is needed, they will go to the resource room. That resource teacher will see where the holes are missing, not teach a whole year and 2 years or 3 years and not getting the child ready for next year. They will build upon and fill in those gaps. So you have some resource teachers that don't do their job. Myth number 5, the IEP is written by the school then explain to the parents. Again, it is written by the IEP. That includes you. So, parents have to sign off on the IEP in order for it to be binding. If you do not agree with something, you tell them, you address it. If you don't agree with what they put in the IEP, don't sign it. Myth number 6, special education is only for kids with serious physical and intellect disability. This is false. Most kids in special education do not have severe disabilities. There are different types of disabilities. You can have an IEP by being super smart, like super genius. That just means that you need a whole nother learning system for you because the regular old system is just below your child's intelligence. So an IEP does not mean that that child has an additional special needs. So let's see here. All right. So understanding the process of an IEP. So let's getting the process started. There is a process that goes on with the IEP, and it starts with the evaluation. So you have to get a referral. You're referred to the SPED department requesting an evaluation. They identify what the issue is or what the problem or concern is. That when they do the testing and the evaluation and assessment, that determines whether or not the child is eligible for an IEP. Then the development of the IEP occurs. That's where they place all the goals, what they need to work on, such as they may have a goal that in one quarter they will identify 25 words. They may have a goal where they're working on a speech goal, an idiom. They may have a language goal. They may have a math goal. It just depends. If they need goals like that, it could just be plain accommodations. Then they will go into implementing the IEP and then evaluate and review. So that's when everybody comes together. You evaluate what you found. This is what's going to go into the IEP. Everybody reviews all the information to the IEP, or if IEP is not warranted, and they go from there. Determining IEP eligibility. So once your child has been evaluated and test results are in, the school will determine if your child is eligible for IEP. There are 2 questions. Does your child have one or more of the 13 conditions that are covered up under the IDA law? 2, does your child need services or accommodation to succeed at school? That's what they want to know. Does your child fall up under the federal law guidelines? And does your child need accommodations to succeed in school? IEP team decides if your child is qualified for an IEP at a special eligibility meeting. So that's when everybody gets together. They talk about the data that they've collected, and then they learn what to expect out of the eligibility meeting. They discover your state's requirements through parent training and centers, and then start getting to know important IEP terms you're likely to hear. So the other ones are basically tips for you parents. So you want to know the terms of what's going to be in the IEP. Ask questions, take notes, because they'll use some big terms and you may not be familiar with. They'll put all the testing in there that you may not understand, and it sounds like jargon. And then there are parent trainings for IEP, just to help you to understand actually, so that you can look at an IEP or look at your child's IEP and then go through what that means. So weight options if your child isn't eligible for an IEP. So what if your child is not eligible for IEP? Maybe your child is eligible for a 504, or maybe your child is eligible for an IEE. So, and that's an independent educational evaluation. So you just have to figure out, if you feel that your child is eligible for something, then where does your child fit in those guidelines? And if you don't approve of the district testing, you can test in outside resources. So you want to let the district recommend or say that, because whatever the district says, the district has to pay for. If you don't want to pay for those testing, you want to try to get the district to say it, because if they say it, they have to pay for it. Just keynote. So anatomy of an IEP. So later on, I will post a link later to show you an example of an IEP for the anatomy of the IEP in the link once we get this uploaded. Oh, sorry. So this is how to read an IEP. So I'm not going to go through all of these because there's a lot of components to it. But as you can see, one of the components is for IEP is describe the student's present level and performance. So you may see one thing, but the school and the district is going to see something else. When they test your child, they're going to test it on a totally different children their own age test. Knowing good and well, they have not tested many children with this test that didn't have a special, they needed help or accommodations. So you have to be aware of that. So your child you may feel that your child performs at a greater level than what they're performing at. And the school, if the school doesn't see it, there's not, I mean, you can fight it and fight it and fight it. Yeah. Unless more parents raise their voice, children are going to fall through the cracks. So, all right. So another one is describe the student's progress towards annual goals. So how are they progressing? Are they meeting the goals that was set in the IEP? That's basically what it means. You see some other ones here. If you like this PowerPoint, please let me know and I will inbox it to you, because I'm not going to go through all of these. There's a lot of them, as you can see. All right, we're going to get to the 504 plan, and then we will be done after the 504 plan, unless there's any questions. What is a 504 plan? So glad you asked. So a 504 plans are a formal plans that schools develop to give kids with disability the support they need, that covers any condition that limits daily activity in a major way. These plans prevent discrimination, and they protect the rights of kids with disabilities in school. They're covered under the 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. This is a civil rights law. That needs no other explanation. So what's in a 504 plan? So a 504 plan often includes accommodations such as changes in environments, like taking their tests. They need to take their tests in a quiet place, but that also can be put in an IEP. Changing in instructions, so checking the frequency or having key access or repeating something over again. Having notes for that student, changing how curriculums is presented. So some teachers, I know in Kansas, there were 4 different levels of students. So you had your regular students, you had your students that were in the SPED program, you had your students that was in the resource program, and you had your Quest students that were your high academic genius type students. So teachers had to have, even though they taught the same material, they had to have different printouts of the work that make the accommodation for each student. That's a lot of work for teachers, but very well needed. And you can also find that in the IEP as well. Accommodations don't change what kids learn, just how they learn it. The goal is to remove barriers and give children access to learning. So one removes the barriers, but if you look at an IEP, it sort of creates a barrier. What is the purpose of a 504? I think we stated that before, but this was just a little bit more information about what's the purpose of a 504. 504s IEPs versus 504. So we're going to go over a couple of differences. We won't go over a lot because I think there's like 3 or 4 slides of this, and I don't want to keep you on here all day because I was late. So basic description for both is IEPs a blueprint or a plan for a child's special education experience at school. A 504 is a blueprint or a plan for how the school will provide support and remove barriers for a student with a disability. Laws that apply. So for our IEP, the Individuals with Disability Act, the Individual with Disability Education Act. This is a federal special education law for children with disabilities. 504 plan is Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. This is a federal civil law to stop discrimination against people with disability. A lot of this you can read on your own, who creates the 504. So the IEP, you have a team, the psychologist, the specialist, an interpreter, the teacher, the resource teacher, the SPED person, the counselor. With a 504, even with the IEP, you can have the nurse in there. When we did ours, we had a nurse in there because my kids take medication. One kid has seizures, or if they have a compromised immune system, you want to have that nurse in there. 504 does the same thing. Even though it says different things, you have the same people in the meeting. There's really no difference. Oh, I think I went back. So that is it for our 504 and IEP. There really is not a real big difference other than your IEP is more of a legal document. Your 504 is more of so that you don't get discriminated by they both serve the same purpose. Normally, they'll use the 504 for kids that have a medical condition. They really use that 504 for kids that have a medical condition and not a IEP. You cannot have both. You cannot have an IEP and you cannot have a 504 at the same time. You have to have one of the other. So either the IEP or the 504. So I hope that this has been helpful for you guys. That if you have any questions or information, that you will definitely email us at the email at the bottom and we will get the information out to you. If you are in a state and you don't know if there's anybody that will help you read or decipher or tear apart an IEP, let us know. We'll find the information out for you. There are several agencies that will help you to understand an IEP because you need to understand before you sign it. Now you can call for a IEP review because you disagree with something. Because sometimes they will put wording in the IEP that will say your child needs to go to a special education because the resource teacher doesn't want to do their job. Or because the resource teacher is so overwhelmed that they just want to give it to the SPED department or give that child to the SPED department. And the child doesn't even belong in that room. So you want to make sure that, one, you look at the ratios. If the SPED and the resource kids are combined, that's not healthy. Your child is going to get lost. Two, you need to make sure that you hold your districts and your schools accountable for the IEPs and the 504s. Hold your principals accountable. If they won't do anything, then you go over their head. So 3, you want to make sure that you read every paper document. Create you an IEP or a 504 binder. If you have testing that you've done outside, you make sure that you have that in there. That if it contradicts what the school is saying, you want to bring all evidence to the table to help your child. Because if you don't advocate for your child, they sure are not. You'll have some teachers, really good teachers, that will advocate for your children. But then you have teachers that they're tired, they're burnt out, and they just don't care. So, all righty, guys, we thank you. We appreciate you. Next Wednesday, we will be talking about the difference between the dorm life, residential life, and mainstream life. So we look forward to having you. Be blessed.